I'm going to move my keyboard just like they did. We know Rabbi Akiva had a keyboard.
Had a keyboard.
His was made out of wood. Okay, Steve is here. Oh boy. Okay, thank you for coming. Also, Dr. Stein. And we are streaming live from this side of my room to this side of my room. Okay. Does anybody have any questions? You have to forgive me. Oh, we increased. Hello, Esther. I teach online. I use a platform named Blackboard that I really don't care for, but I spend a lot of my time saying, any questions? Any questions? I get questions here and there. Okay, but seriously now, we are going to use this lovely book. It is Rabbi Joseph Telushkin, who I don't know if it's more, every rabbi is writing a book these days. Shoo, I wrote a book. But more and more, hello, Esther. More and more rabbis are hi, Steve, how are you? Right this way? Okay. More and more rabbis are writing books these days, and everybody is trying to, I don't know, are we simplifying Judaism? Are we making it more accessible? There you go, we're making it more accessible. And there's an old story where the young rabbi gets out of seminary and he takes his first pulpit. And he's sitting with the temple president and saying, could you suggest, I'm happy to meet with you, Mr. President. Hey, Doc, about what I should talk about in my sermons. And the rabbi says, I got all kinds of ideas for my sermons. And the president says, tell me. He says, well, I'm going to talk about keeping kosher. And the president makes a face and he says, Rabbi, maybe you should avoid that one. Not that many of your congregants keep kosher. Oh, says the rabbi, young guy, right? And he says, I'll talk about keeping Shabbos. And he says, I don't know, Rabbi. I know you'll turn people off if you talk about keeping Shabbos. A lot of our people have businesses and they keep them open on Shabbos. And the rabbi says, okay, I got one more. I got one more. He says, I'll talk about the integrity of the marital relationship. And the rabbi says, Rabbi, in this congregation, we have some congregants, they like to fool around. Maybe you shouldn't raise that either. So the rabbi says, you shot down all of my topics. What should I talk about? And the president goes, talk about Judaism. So anyway, the question is, does Judaism ask us to change our behavior, or is it just an ethical system? Thoughts? Any thoughts?
Well, we should have our behavior based on Torah.
Yes, that's very true. Now, do we have our behavior based on the Torah that Moses got at Mount Sinai, or is it the Torah that has somewhat evolved to this point? I mean, Moses.
I think it's somewhat evolved because things change with the times.
Yes.
And you can't, we're not in the desert wandering, and we're not, wearing sandals and robes and having farms and, giving sacrifices and, things have changed with times. It's not, we don't have a temple to give sacrifices, and most of us are actually turned off by that thought.
Okay. All right. See,
it reminds me. I'm sorry.
Doc. No, Doc, go ahead.
That joke that you just told reminded me of a story of a long time ago. A female friend of a friend of mine, was super religious, kosher, kept observant Shabbos. There's one of the 10 commandments she couldn't subscribe to. That was the one on adultery. She had a problem with that one.
But she ate kosher after.
That's right.
All right. Takes all kinds. We do allow for human failings. And just touching upon what Esther said, the Torah, they say every Jew writes their own Shulchan Aruch. Every Jew writes their own code of Jewish law. Mm-hmm. And here I would have to agree with Rabbi Dr. Mordechai Kaplan, let him rest in peace. He invented Reconstructionism, which currently is not doing so well. But the principles are still strong. I believe that the Torah we evolve, for the most part, is sociological. I think it depends. Hi, Arlene, how are you? I think it depends on our social conditions. It depends on how we live in our host country. And I mean, I don't consider this a host country. I'm an American. I mean, going back 2-3 generations, I'm an American. But the point I'm trying to make is that the Torah does adapt. And the extent to which Jews allow it to adapt determines their particular denomination. Like you could say the Reform rush to embrace the latest sociological change. The Reform are so far the only denomination which allows transgendered rabbis. And I have no problem with that personally. It's kind of like when women rabbis first graduated from different rabbinical schools. They would say, oh, she's a woman rabbi. I would say, is he or she a good rabbi? Is this person effective at doing their job? But this particular book, just to make an abrupt leap, is Rabbi Telushkin. He's very readable. I don't know if he has other degrees besides the rabbinate. I know he's an Orthodox rabbi, but I decided to use him today because this was a quotation that I posted. It is attributed, it doesn't have to be attributed, we know he said it, Rabbi Avram Yitzchak HaKohen Cook. His dates are 1865 to 1935, so he missed all the dramatic historical episodes that went into, God forbid, the Holocaust and also the founding of the State of Israel. But his claim to fame is that he was the first chief rabbi of Israel, even before there was an Israel. In the late 20s and 1930s, and he died in 35, clearly he tried to unite, because in those days in Israel, you had the extreme secular on the left, you had the Shomer Hatzair, the young guard, and on the right, as there continue to be, there are Haredim, the ultra-Orthodox. And he came in for some knocks because he did outreach to the seculars. And a lot of the religious said, don't waste your time. But he was a very loving kind of guy. And his particular claim to fame, the aphorism for which he is known more than anything else is, and I want you to knock this around a little bit. The truly righteous do not complain about evil. They increase the good. The truly religious do not complain about corruption. They increase pure dealing. And they bring everyone to God. Now, number one, is that feasible? Is it doable? And here I am referring to our current situation, the situation in the country and in the world. Is it possible to follow Rabbi Cook's dictum? How do we increase justice in terms of fighting evil?
I would say by electing the right people.
Yeah, that would help. Right. Okay.
But he said that if the truly righteous doesn't complain about evil, that not what you said.
I'm sorry, Doreen, I can't hear you. What?
Somebody is banging something, and I can't tell where it's coming from.
Yeah, somebody's walking on a wooden floor. Okay. If you could just turn off your mic, that would be very nice.
You know what? You mute everybody. Hold on a minute. Hold on.
Okay. Well, you're a participant. Doreen, you were going to say something.
I just muted everybody so you can't hear. Didn't you say if that what you said? He said that was the truly righteous doesn't complain about evil or something like
They
that.
increase the good. They don't complain about evil. They increase the good.
So all of us complaining about what's going on in the country was
Okay. Well, you remember in the 60s, they used to say, if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. And I can't say that I am the most activist kind of person in that regard. But his idea was that stop kvetching, do something about it. There's another derivation of this. There's a novel called Herzog by Saul Bellow. It's his only novel I can read. And he says, if you're on the knees of your soul, do something useful. Scrub the floor. What is he saying there?
I guess you can always do something. It's like you can always do something. There's always a silver lining. My expression is always a silver lining, even bad stuff.
Okay, all
You
right.
know, even
Anybody?
with this being stuck in the house, we're all here together doing this, which is good.
No, this is important.
Yeah,
This is
there's always,
important.
there's always something good. So if you get down this scrub, I understand that. It makes sense.
Yes, right. It's also because I like to say about Jews, kvetchere vivere, to kvetch is to live. You know, as long as I'm kvetching, I'm doing. My experience has been, you shouldn't know from it, with folks at the end of life, when they stop complaining, that's bad. Complaining is not a bad thing. Complaining, if it has some effect, complaining means if you get up and you do something to help yourself, if you're capable of doing that, then you are still representing your own humanity. That's the thing. Okay? All right. The other thing is, how many mitzvot are there? Anybody know how many mitzvot? Extra credit question. Starts with a 6. 613. Yes.
613.
And the way the rabbis explain, there's a controversy about what constitutes a mitzvah. You've got all these different lists. I could think of at least 3 different lists. Rambam, Maimonides did one. Ramban, Nachmanides did one, both 11th century. And if you fast forward to the mid 18th century, you've got the Chafetz Chaim, and he wrote a book called the Sefer HaMitzvot, the Book of Mitzvot. Because what is the essence of Judaism? Hey, Joni, is it a matter of belief or is it a matter of doing?
I think it's a matter of doing
Yes.
the
Doing.
mitzvah.
Yes. The Reconstructionists, see, the Recons had all the cool expressions. Rabbi Kaplan once made a book of expressions, which unfortunately I no longer possess. But you get up in the morning and you say to yourself, maybe God exists, maybe God doesn't exist. Never mind, it's time to daven. Well, why should I daven to a God whose existence I doubt?
Just in case.
Yeah, okay, good, just in case. Anybody else?
Isn't that a basic difference between the dogma of Christianity versus Judaism? In Christianity, the first priority is believing, and in Judaism, the first priority is performing, doing.
Yes, but to my judgment, and I'm certainly happy to hear from my colleague, Reverend David, about this, I consider them to be mirror images, okay?
Yeah.
Meaning
Yeah.
that in Judaism, you get up in the morning, you can debate about God's existence, or you can daven. The word daven means to judge. The Hebrew word lahitpalel means to judge oneself. How am I measuring up as a human being? Am I doing the right thing to myself, to my family, to my, you can extend it to the whole earth. In Christianity, it's different, okay? And this is just my understanding. I am certainly happy to be corrected. In the beginning, you believe on the Lord Jesus Christ, who came down to earth, suffered, died for your sake, and you accept him as your Lord and Savior. You take within yourself the image of Jesus. That's the whole purpose of communion.
Yeah.
And that self-identification should motivate you to go out there. And again, that's it's not a bad t-shirt, really. We should have what would Moses do? What would Jesus do? Okay. And so they really are opposite sides of the same coin, reflections of each other. The point is this. Who do you want to spend the day with? A so-called religious person who lies and cheats and steals when they think nobody is looking, or a self-professed atheist who at least is a mensch? You see?
The mensch.
Right.
The latter, yes.
Right. There you go. I mean, well, I don't have to give you a list. You can make your own list. All right. So anyway, the 613 mitzvot. There's a whole thing in the Talmud, okay? I looked it up, and of course I couldn't find it online. But the essence is this. In the beginning were 613 mitzvot. And there are some really, minutia type mitzvot there too. So obviously everybody chooses. Oh, I do all the mitzvot. Yeah, well, good luck. The second temple was destroyed in the year 70. Where are you going with that sheep? Never mind. Okay. So anyway, the righteous comes along. I think it was King David who reduced them to 11 and so on. And then Habakkuk. I love that. Yeah, that's a great name for a Siamese cat. This is my cat, Habakkuk. Anyway, they finally reduce it to 1. The Hatzadik Chai be'emunato. The righteous person shall live by their faith. That's all it is. Do the right thing. Okay? Doesn't matter. Be a vegan. Don't be a vegan. Have you clocked kosher tongue lately? I mean, things like that. But the essence of doing mitzvot. Okay, well, this is one of those questions we've done before. If you do the mitzvah and you don't particularly feel like doing the mitzvah, but you do it anyway, is it a mitzvah?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Still a mitzvah.
Good job.
Now, if you do a mitzvah with somebody else's money and they gave you permission, is that a mitzvah? I'll give you
so,
that.
yes.
Wasn't fair. That wasn't fair. I'll give you the scenario. Whenever a congregant comes to me and says, Rabbi, have you got a blessing? I'm going to take a trip to Israel. I say, I give them $1 and I say, could you please give this to the first beggar that you meet in Jerusalem on the off chance that she is Messiah? And it's funny over the years how different congregants have embraced this mitzvah. Sometimes I'll say, yeah, I gave it. Reb David, when you went to Israel, you came back with a receipt. I still have that receipt. Thank you.
The man in the shul said, you want a receipt for this?
Of course.
I'm looking for big money, but I did deliver it for you.
Thank you. See, but the point is, you become the shliach mitzvah. The person who carries the gelt, the money, becomes the messenger of the mitzvah. They, in effect, without them, wouldn't be a mitzvah. So they get a piece of the action too. I suppose I should say that more rabbinically, but that's the gist of it. Okay. What are we talking here? The essence is this. Yes, do the mitzvah. Do it however you do it. God will judge. You know, if you do it grudgingly, if you do it willingly, this kind of thing. But the essence is the faith. However much faith you produce. You can't do it 100% all the time, but the important thing is to do the mitzvah. Okay, should I tell the story about the 2 dentists? I get a lot of mileage out of the story of the 2 dentists.
Yes, please.
Okay, here comes the story of the 2 dentists. Now you got 2 Jewish dentists, of course, and they're sharing a practice. And they're leaving the office one night. Everything with them is split straight down the middle. They're both making exactly the same amount of money. And as they're locking up the office, a young woman comes up to them and she's all raggedy. And she says, oh, doctors, she says, could you please help me? My children and I are living in poverty. And give me a number. How many kids does she have?
5.
Kids.
She has 11 kids. I took your 5 and your 6. I added them together. Okay, apparently there's one thing she knows how to do well. Anyway, so she has the 11 kids. You shouldn't know from it. And could you please give me something? So dentist number 1 bursts into tears, says, oh, madam, I feel so bad for you. You must let me help you. And he gives her $10. Now, dentist number 2, okay, he's got to get going because he and his wife are going to the opera. They're going to see Aida, not with Elton John. And she said to him, if he was late one more time, she would go without him. So he's in a hurry. So he pulls out his checkbook. This is a very old story. And he writes a check for $100 and he gives it to the young woman. He says, here, and he runs down the hall. Who got the bigger mitzvah?
The guy with the $10.
The guy with the $10. Okay. Judy, what do you say, Judy?
I said the guy with the $10.
$10. It's so funny how people latch on to the $10 for some tears. Okay, anybody else? Anybody else?
I say the $100.
$100. Yeah, there you go. Okay. Doreen, what?
They were equal.
Oh, they're equal. Oh, see, is she always like this, Joni? Okay.
Down the
Well, they did
yellow stripes on the street.
Yeah.
Just one guy was in a rush.
See,
And his
nobody
mess
knows.
was greater because he risked missing his opera.
Yes, you don't mess with your spouse. My goodness.
Yeah.
Oh
And
my.
he took the time to write the check out.
Yeah, that's right. He had to write out the check.
It would have been quicker for him to just taking out $10.
Yes, yes, I'm sure. Or borrow it from his partner.
He did the check bounce.
All right. And the answer is you're all right, because we don't know. Okay. Now,
Oh.
historically, when I tell the story, I make the point that $100 will go farther than 10. But a lot of people are attracted by the first one, who is either separated or divorced or single, because he has
And
plenty
no
of
place
time
to
when he
go.
leaves work. He'll go to the cafeteria after. But you see, the point is we don't know. Only God can judge. Okay. And there are plenty of people out there who, they're two-faced. They're religious on the outside. They're God knows what on the inside. Okay, so here we go.
Later.
So, okay. Now everything, Rabbi Telushkin's thesis is that every mitzvah, and I got a problem with this. All right, let's say the most mitzvot are ethical in structure. For example, what was Abraham's mission?
To lead the Jews out of Israel, out of Egypt.
No, that's Moses.
Hachnasas Orchim,
Hachnasas
Hachnasas
Orchim,
Orchim?
which means what?
inviting in the guest, inviting in the
Right.
stranger.
That, according to the Midrash, according to the legends, that is Abraham's major mitzvah. However, what was the mission of Abraham's life?
To spread monotheism.
Yes. Chuck, did you have a
To-
comment?
To populate the nation. A nation.
Yes.
To make
Okay,
a
we're
family.
sorry.
To make a family, which grew.
Oh,
Yes, you're both right. See, it's so cool being Jewish. You're both right. You're right. You're also right.
Politician.
But his name speaks for itself. Avraham, father of the people.
Yes, father of multitudes. And that's why he ends up with one boy, another son of a concubine. But no, I'd say we're doing okay. I think you got like 12 mil Jews in the world today. Sadly, before the war, there were 18. But believe me, as we speak, there are young Jewish families who are doing their level best to decrease the disparity. Okay? But it's ethical in the sense that, and you folks said this, he is trying to spread ethical monotheism. Now, why is it ethical? Because how do we characterize God, even when we don't understand him? Okay? Any thoughts? What is God's personality?
God is omniscient and omnipotent and almighty and
But what is God's relationship with humanity?
Loving.
Nine.
Loving. Yes, very good. Anything else?
I
were
don't think
created
much
in his
relationship with
We're
humanity.
created in his image. Very good. I'm
And
sorry,
now-
Doreen.
I don't really think he has much of a relationship with us now. Once we're created, I think, and I'm not sure, like, we're created, like,
Okay, that's a very good comment. The point is that, and there's always another story. This is, I think, Rabbi Nachman of Bratslav, where he visited the altar of Slobodka. I love that, the altar, the elderly rabbi of Slobodka, when he was very young. And he had an audience with the Rebbe. And they said to him, Nachman, he says, tell me something about God. And he, of course, is very young and enthusiastic. He says, oh, Hashem haaretz maloa. To God belong the heavens and their fullness. And the Rebbe says, that's not right. And he says, okay, he says, Kaveh el had Hashem chazak v'yametz levecha. Hope towards God. Hope and strengthen your heart. Hope towards God. And the Rebbe says, you're a nice young man, and you clearly know a lot of Torah, but you're not getting it right. Yeah, I'll change the question for you. He says, where does God enter? Where does God enter? And Nachman was missing the point because he's saying God is here already. And the altar says, no, God comes where he is invited. So you see, Doreen, it's a matter. Yes, you could say God is far away from us now, but we have to invite God in. I'm not answering this. Oh, I know who that is. Okay, I have to. All right, she's not calling for me. All right, anyway. So you see, God only comes where God is invited. That's the important thing. So if you open your heart to God, you'll be better motivated. I understand what you're saying, that it seems as though God is far away from the earth because there are certain people who are so full of pride and egotism that they shut out God. About these people, God says, it is not possible for me and that person to exist in the same universe. But he also says, don't lose hope. And the truth is, I find my hope building when I speak with you folks, because, and I don't mind, I have to be honest, a rabbi shouldn't lie. I am not the most optimistic
Rabbi,
person.
isn't there another way to put it, that God is ubiquitous, that he's just
Yes.
ever embracing wherever
Yes.
we are?
Mhm. God is everywhere at once, which is harder to do than it sounds. Okay. But God is also, God has two aspects. Okay. God is the judge, the true judge, Dayan Ha'emet. When God forbid we do a funeral, we make the bracha, the blessing. Blessed are you, Lord our God, the true judge. But God is also Harachaman. Okay. I think once again, I can't think which Rebbe said it. The Erbishter, the Erbishter. Anybody know that? Yiddish, something? Means the merciful. Sorry?
The arbiter?
More like it sounds like the arbiter. Yes. And he is that too, but it means he's merciful. He is compassionate, but he's also judgmental. Never feel that a person can fool God. Someone, for example, who never goes to church, never goes to a house of worship, but they can put on the dog, so to speak. They can, actually, I think Jesus comes down on these people too. He says the Pharisees who daven with such ceremony, and they're shuckling back and forth. Okay, you should better pray alone in your closet, he says. All right, look, my feeling is whatever works for you, do it. Just don't tell me, number one, that your religion involves, I don't know, like Santeria, where they do socially objectionable things to chickens. Okay. Our religion is meant not to hurt people. I'll give you one quick story about how Jews are very good at hurting other Jews. This is back in the days, at least 10 years ago, maybe more, when the Reform were establishing congregations in Israel. There was a Reform congregation, and their rabbi was Rav Levi Weiman Kelman. When you get a hyphen, that's very serious, okay? When it's not enough, for example, I have these kids in my classes, they're Hispanic kids, I love my kids, and they're hyphenated, okay? Well, if a boy with a hyphen marries a girl with a hyphen, whose initials do they put on the fingertip towels? I just need to know this, very important. Okay, so Rabbi Weiman Kelman and his congregation are celebrating Simchat Torah. And what do you do on Simchat Torah in the street? Keep it clean. What? You dance. So they had a couple of Sifrei Torah. A Sefer Torah is at least 20,000, more like 20, 25,000. These are not cheap things. And of course, it's the center of our worship. So they're dancing in the street, and everybody knows they're Reformed. They're all wearing yarmulkes. In Israel, even Reform Jews tend to be more religious than America. And along comes some Hasidic boys, and they start dancing with the Reform. And the Reform are happy at first because they think, oh, isn't that nice? They accept us as Jews. Because, you know, Jews make the best anti-Semites. Really, it's amazing. We have practice. The Hasidic boys grab the Torahs and start running down the street. They're saving the Torahs from the evil Reform Jews. Well, they had quite a tumult getting it back. But that's why I say, if you pretend to be religious and you keep strictly kosher and Shabbos and all that business, but you go out into the world and you cheat your fellow human being, it's not worth anything. You can't fool God, you know? Believe me, people have tried. All right, let's take a look. Here we go. There are 3 laws. I don't want to do that one. I want to do this one. Oh, this is nice. Okay. The idea of doing mitzvot ethically. Do you recall? People never remember it because we do it once a year and then we go back to it on Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur, there's a haftorah, that is a portion from the prophets, which is very ethically based. What do we do on Yom Kippur? What's the supreme mitzvah of Yom Kippur?
Fasting.
Daven.
Yes, we daven and we fast. We afflict our bodies, we bend over like a bulrush.
We daven fast.
Anybody else? Stu?
Daven fast?
Wake up a little early.
Repent.
Atonement?
But then we repeat.
Yes.
We fast.
Lots of
Repent.
Yeah.
It's
I
atonement.
used to have this, I'm sorry?
Atonement.
Yes, we do. We atone. And the interpretation of atonement is A-T at O-N-E 1 meant we are at one with God, okay? And we better finish at 1. No, we don't. We never do. We always go on till 2 p.m. All right. But what Isaiah is saying in the Haftorah, in the portion from the prophets, and Isaiah is easily going away, the most popular prophet for Haftorahs, okay? Some adults will come up to me and say, "Oh, Rabbi, my Haftorah was from Isaiah. What date is that?" Could be a bunch, really, because Isaiah's got 150 chapters. Oh my goodness, he has so many chapters. Now we don't say there was one Isaiah. We don't say there were 2 Isaiahs. There were 3 Isaiahs, and they cannot say first Isaiah, second Isaiah, third Isaiah. They go first Isaiah, Deutero Isaiah, and Trito Isaiah. What? Okay, yes. But apparently he starts out young, as do we all, and he does grow into the job. He didn't really want to be a prophet, but he turns out to be the most prolific prophet there was. He even had a secretary called Baruch who followed him around. Wonderful. But he says, God asks, through Isaiah, God asks the Jewish people, is such the fast I desire, a day for people to starve their bodies? Do you call that a fast, a day when the Lord is favorable? No, this is the fast I desire, to let the oppressed go free and to break off every yoke. It is to share your bread with the hungry, when you see the naked, to clothe them. This is a very important shift in Judaism. Because prior to that, what did you have to do to be a good Jew? Hint, the temple was involved.
Sacrifices.
That's it.
What are services?
No, they didn't have services yet. They kind of did, but it wasn't official. Everything was involved in sacrifice. If you could afford it, a cow or a sheep was very appreciated. If you couldn't afford that, you could offer a single dove because they were relatively inexpensive. And when you burned the dove, you burned it with its feathers on. How do you think that smelled?
Not very pleasant.
Pretty awful, real sulfur smell. But the rabbis tell us the miraculousness of the temple was such that the dove smoke never smelled bad. Okay? Now, who wants to buy a bridge from me in Brooklyn?
Yeah.
You know, that's the other thing. God says, look, I'm going to give you some whoppers, some strange mitzvot, okay? But for the most part, we Jews would like to think that our religion is logical. It's not logical. But I tell you what, you know, I read a lot of those atheists. I have nothing against atheists. I don't care. I'd rather daven with 9, you know, honest atheists than 9, well, you know. But it's very hard for me to believe in nothing, okay? It's very hard for me to believe that the tree out there, to whose growth I did absolutely nothing to stimulate it, well, who created the first tree? Who was it? It's not just this whole idea of God sitting on a throne with a long white beard. I have got to believe there is some form of intelligence in the universe. Somebody has got to be calling the shots. Okay? I guess I'm going to be a theist forever because the other stuff just doesn't appeal to me. And plus, a lot of these atheists, I mean, God love the atheists, but it's so obnoxious. It's like, if you say, God bless you, they say, don't say that. Okay. All right, whatever. Here we go.
Rabbi, you mentioned sacrifice in the
Yes.
days of the temple. When we were in Japan, we experienced the Buddhist tradition of burning incense, and it's a beautiful tradition where
Yes.
you go up to the fire and you throw the stick in the fire and burn it.
Any particular type of wood? I'm not being facetious.
What do they use?
It's incense.
It's incense that they
It's a
burn.
stick of
Very
incense.
nice. I think that's very lovely. I could see some.
I didn't do it. He did it.
Oh, all right. Well, he's more religious than you, Mrs. Stein.
I performed a mitzvah.
I don't know.
That's very good.
He came very close to being kicked out of there.
I could see you got a little carried away
There were
with
some Buddhist monks looking at him a little suspiciously.
Oh, yes. Well, okay. All right. Here we go. This is nice.
It's a very interesting place. You know, mind you, there's more than one Buddha. There's so many Buddhas around.
Yes. I have a couple. Oh, I have. Here he is. Yes. Yes. I don't worship him, but he sees Buddha on a stick. I don't worship him,
Is
but
it edible?
I admire his compassion and his patience and his meditative quality. When I'm running all over the place, I take a look at him and he calms me down, sort of.
Well, Buddhism doesn't say that you can't be other religions as well.
Right.
I'm
There
nothing
are
against that.
there are a lot of Jubus. We have some Jews who became Buddhist monks and nuns. Yes. Correct. Okay.
It's an
Well, here we
interesting
go.
group of people.
How do you represent your religious love? It's kind of like if you have siblings, okay, or just good friends or whatever, and you this is Dennis Prager. Dennis Prager is from California. He's a very learned man. He's written a lot of books. He's a little bit right wing for my taste, but I still think he has something to say. And he says the greatest joy that a parent experiences is when they're eavesdropping and they hear their children saying, I love you. You see, I love you. My own relationship with my sister, and she's the only survivor of my family, quite honest, because we have cousins in New York who were alienated about 30 years ago, and we haven't spoken since, which is unfortunate. It had nothing to do with us. It was our parents. But anyway, if you hear your children or a friend's children say, I love you, you kvel. What is it to kvel? Kvell.
Smile, you feel good.
Yeah,
Makes you
Sorry,
happy.
what?
As a mother, or as a
good.
parent.
Yes,
feel good.
yes. It's machaya your hearts. It gives your heart a nice stimulation. Human love is probably the most remarkable emotion we can ever experience. And I know family politics, and I know this is why we have friends, because we can't stand some of our relatives, this kind of thing. You know, let him rest in peace. My Uncle Irving was a very dour man. And when Ann Beth and I were first married, because he was the only handy one in the family, you know, I've met handy Jews. Okay, any handy Jews here? Handy anybody? Okay, that the number of handy Jews I have met in my life, you can count on the fingers of one hand and have fingers left over. But you see, we all know a guy. We all know a guy. But if anybody ever asks us for the name and number of our guy, we say, oh, I can't tell you. He's not doing it anymore, or he moved away, or he got divorced, or whatever. Anyway, Irving, we were living in this basement in East Flatbush in Brooklyn. And we were living there because I had no money. I was a graduate student. Graduate students are universally poor unless they're getting money from their parents. And I was not. And we were newlyweds. And we got this basement apartment, and we had him come to put locks on the door. And it was a hollow core door. And he puts this big monster Seagull lock on it, you know, the old fashioned brass Seagull lock. And the thing was this, you had to give Irving his lunch, and it had to be, nobody ever knew. So Aunt Ann told Ann Beth, offer Uncle Irving his lunch. So she made tuna fish, she had rye bread, She sliced a tomato. Everything was the way he liked it. And she said to him, Irving, do you want to eat? He says nothing. He does the lock. Irving, do you want to eat? He's all finished. He's getting his tools together. He's leaving. She says, Uncle Irving, please don't leave. I made you lunch. He left without eating the lunch. Later on, Aunt Ann explained to us, you don't ask him. You just put it down on the table and say, Irving, eat. We didn't talk to him for a while. We found out later when he went home, he told Aunt Ann that lock is useless. Anybody who wants to get into the apartment will kick through the door because it's a hollow core door. So we were never burgled because we had nothing. What did we have? When you're a newlywed, what do you have? Come on. All right. So anyway, what is the point?
I had two occasions to call a locksmith. Once at the condo down there in Florida, and
Yes.
once to my office, medical office recently. And coincidentally, both locksmiths were Israelis.
Oh, wonderful. There you go. They'll get you in. Okay. Anyway, just as you kvel, you take pride when your children say that they love each other, so does God, because we are all God's children. And, you know, it's kind of like in our neighbor faith, Jesus is love. God is love. And it's not easy to love people. Do you think you can fulfill love your neighbor? That's a universal code.
No.
Anybody
Not
love their
necessarily.
neighbor lately? I'm sorry?
Not
No?
necessarily.
Okay. Anybody else?
You like someone, then you don't necessarily love them.
Okay. Steve, what were you saying?
Endure,
was saying like maybe.
Like maybe. Okay.
Like,
endure.
Yeah. You'll be so happy. See, I changed it. I went to respect your neighbor. Just respect them. That's all. We've been going for walks because my wife does that kind of thing. So, because I'm so athletic. And we take the dog because, well, never mind. The point is that when I pass people, I say hello. And God shouldn't punish me. It's really a waste of time, you know?
It is.
Either they ignore you or they don't hear you, or it's very strange. Okay, what else we got that's ethical? All right, this is what you got. It's more than 10. We'll do a few of them. Living a blameless life. Who lives a blameless life?
Only a child.
Okay, all right.
Maybe not even that.
What,
No.
Judy? Not even
Maybe
that?
not even a child. It depends
Okay,
on circumstances.
That's valid. Yes.
Born,
So sorry, Chuck.
a newborn.
Oh, yes, Steve, a newborn. Yes. I'm always getting blamed. No matter what it is, I get blamed. Okay. All right. I grew up with a couple of rules, you know, don't throw it out. David will eat it. And and where's David? He did something. Okay. The greatest sin that I ever committed when I was a kid. Do you remember those egg holders, those egg containers on the door of the fridge? And your mother had to stand there and take the egg out of the box. It was perfectly happy in the box. She had to put it in the plastic geschäft.
Yes.
One time, I'm standing and looking in the refrigerator because that's what kids do. And my sister is making fun. And she got me so upset, my hand jerked. You know, I didn't want it to, okay, inadvertently. And I broke a dozen eggs. And my mother stood there and said, get out, get out. So she chased me out of the house without a book, which was a great tragedy. Because I never went outside. Why should I go outside? The house had books, the house had food. And I stayed out. I figured, well, this is it. I'm 11 years old. I'll join the circus. I'll be the guy in the green suit who follows the elephant. Yeah.
I'm a rabbi.
No, in those days, I was doing everything I could not to be a rabbi. Okay, what else? You speak the truth in your heart. That is
On video, by the way.
only you know the truth. And, well, that doesn't make sense. I don't understand. You speak the truth in your heart. I'll read this to you. You act truthfully. There you go. even when the truth is known to you alone and is disadvantageous in practical terms. Is that true? You do that all the time? You always tell the truth?
To who?
Sometimes you don't always tell the truth.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Like my mother believes that I go to Chabad, walk
No,
an hour.
Maybe you walk past it.
Wha- It's an hour walk if I were to go to Chabad.
Oh, okay. All
I'm
right.
not walking an hour,
All right.
but that's
you
what she believes because that's what I need to do to keep the peace.
My mother did that too. My mother should rest in peace. We lived in Canarsie, Brooklyn. We were up the block from the Young Israel of Canarsie, which is modern Orthodox.
Okay.
And I had a student pulpit out in Jersey. And she said to me, she said, David, she says, David, go to the Young Israel. Just once, go to the Young Israel. She thought that the tentacles of the faith would call me back. Mind you, I'm a student rabbi at this point. I don't know if I was going to hell, but at least I would have a nice, like a box seat. And one Shabbos, I did. I got up, I brushed my teeth, I put on my suit and my trench coat. Remember trench coats?
Yes.
Remember them? I like my trench coat. I thought it made me look like an international spy.
Still
I
in
walked-
women.
I walked down the block to the Young Israel and I went in, but I made a mistake. I sat in the back. Now,
Oh.
what is the psychology of sitting in the back of the shul as opposed to sitting in the front of the shul?
You can leave without being seen.
Yes, that's true. Very true. But in an Orthodox shul, if you're in the front, you're davening. If you're in the back, you're talking about the World Series. So I'm sitting in the back and they're talking about the World Series. I don't do the World Series. I'm sorry. So I gave it like 15 minutes and I left. I'm sorry. I'm not very good with Young Israel. Okay, so here we go. Let's see. Have you done evil to your fellow human being?
I hope
And
not.
if you did, please share. Something good. Buddy Hackett said, if you were Catholic, he'd want to go to confession and tell some whoppers to the priest, and the priest would go, no, really? Oh boy, here we go. Okay, moving along. All right, let's see. Master of kindness, far from it. Okay, merit, revered. He says, oh, here we go. This is Rav Moshe Feinstein. Now, Rav Moshe Feinstein is not a Hasidic Rebbe. He is Litvak, okay? He is strictly by the books. But when he was alive, I think he passed in the early 80s. He was considered a Gadol Hador, a great rabbi of the generation. And I have a
I
book
went to
about
his
him.
funeral.
I'm sorry, what?
I went to his funeral.
Oh, where was this? Was it on the Lower East Side?
It was on the Lower East Side. My whole school took a field trip
Ah,
to go to the funeral.
see, that's when you know you're in yeshiva, when a field trip is a funeral.
Right.
Sorry. No, but it was a big mitzvah. No, really, the greatest mitzvah that you can perform, and you can challenge this if you want, but this is what I grew up with. The greatest mitzvah you can perform is anything involving death, okay? Especially going to a lavaya, a funeral, especially going to the funeral of a great, great rabbi. And even if, hello, puppy, even if it's a Gentile funeral and you see the cortege moving through the street, it's that great mitzvah to walk a few steps in the direction of the cortege, because you are escorting a fellow human being who, like us, as Stu pointed out, was made b'tselem Elohim, in the image of God. And universally, this, what are you going to do? It happens to everybody, okay?
It's the one mitzvah you can do that they can't do back to you because they're gone now.
Very good, very good. That's why it's the greatest mitzvah. And in my experience, I don't want to bring anybody down, but we had a Chevra Kadisha, we had a burial society. It literally means the holy society, where we would prepare the bodies ourselves and wash them and dress them and put them in the casket. It's very elemental, really. You can't do it in Florida because the funeral industry here is locked up like a drum. But yes, Doreen.
I used to do the Hebrew Kaddish in the temple and the funeral home in where we lived. With the temple I belonged to before. And I
Okay,
can't
great.
remember what the funeral home was.
Stargate.
Star of David.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we did
Very
it.
nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
did that up in Salt Lake City when I was a kid.
Oh, okay.
My ex-wife was Hever Kadisha for the women,
Yeah.
and they want most of the Hever Kadisha there were the women were older, so they were
Yes.
looking for somebody to train. Well,
Yes.
they lucked out with my gal, and they trained her, and she was really pretty good at it.
Great.
Interesting.
Very good. I had a congregant, let her rest in peace. I'll try and remember her name. She was the heart and soul of our Chevra Kadisha. One time she taught me that when you tie the cloths, because they have like belts, only they're made out of light cloth. When you tie it around the waist of the deceased, you should bunch up 3 sections to represent a shin for the Shema and wrap the rest of the cloth around it. Alice Sussman, she was a character, Alice Sussman. She liked to grow plants. And she had a sister, oh gosh. You know, it's funny, over the years. The point is, my whole life has been a conscious imitation of the people whom I respected, teachers, lay people, friends. And you learn from everybody. What do you learn from the bad people? The tough not the tough teachers, the unfair teachers. What do you learn from them?
How not to treat people.
How not to be. Yes, yes.
Can I
And that's why I urge people to either record it or write their memoirs, because it's very precious to those who come after you, really.
Rabbi, can I just ask a question about when
Yes.
you talked about the mitzvah,
Yes.
performing the mitzvah of going, walking with a procession,
Yes.
any funeral. Question here is, are you doing it in support of the person who died, or are you, isn't the real mitzvah supporting the bereaved, the people that are left behind? Because you go to
Yes.
a funeral, out of respect to your family or friends, you're not doing it for the in honor of the person who died, but you're supporting the bereaved.
Yes, but it's also because I'm speaking here in my experience, where I grew up. You had the Lower East Side, which was Jewish. You had Little Italy, which was Italian. You had the Hispanics here and the African Americans there. And then you had Chinatown. Chinatown is the neighborhood that really took off. And I would be driving through Chinatown, and frequently you had a funeral cortege. So a couple times I fell in with the cortege. It's just the way traffic moves in New York. But also the idea of walking in the street, which is hard to do in Florida because we don't have that many sidewalks. But escorting, if you know the family, obviously you should visit them. I mean, we could get into this, and I don't think we want to, but just this whole thing of you bring something sweet to the bereaved family. Do you take it out of the house?
No,
Oh,
no.
You know, they say to me, oh, Rabbi, make yourself up a plate. And this is back in the days when I was eating cake, you know, because I'll tell you very honestly, there have been some near misses, but I never met a piece of cake I didn't like. And anyway, yeah, a couple times I would make, you know, a plate, but a lot of people will not take food from a shiva house.
Why would you take it with you? You mean to make a plate to go?
I would take a couple of pieces of cake because I didn't want to hurt their feelings.
Okay, it's not something I would do.
They're sitting there with 8 babkas, 3 apple pies, and a bunch of those little pickups. Okay, like I said, I don't eat cake anymore. But anyway, they asked this whole thing with Rav Moshe Feinstein, and it was a big mitzvah, Esther, for you to go. They said to him, what was the most important mitzvah you ever performed throughout your life? And this was a man, he had the Torah at his fingertips. When he was imprisoned by the Soviets, he wrote a commentary on the Talmud just from his head, just to avoid going nuts. He would get every scrap of paper he could find, and he somehow managed to get a pencil or a pen, and he wrote in the margins of the paper. And years later, it was published. after the Soviets let him go. Because the Soviets, they would not keep you if you were a thorn in their side. And this man had such great emunah, such great faith. He beat them solid. One time, a commissar, and you know who the worst commissars were? They were the ones who were Jews. They were the ones who had been born Jews and raised Jews. And this one said, I was the son of the Sheikhet in Ibishev. I was the son of the slaughterer, the ritual slaughterer in Ibishev. And he took a gun. He took a Tokarev, a pistol, and he held it on Rav Moshe. And he says, this little machine has caused a lot of people to change their mind. And Rav Moshe looked at him, and he looked at the gun, and he said, what can you do to me? He says, at worst, you'll take me out of this world, but I get to go to the world to come. Where are you going? And the guy put away the pistol and ran away. See, you don't know, you just don't know. But they said to him, Rav Moshe, they didn't call him Rav Moshe, they called him the Rosh Yeshiva, the head of the yeshiva, because this is what he did. The Rosh Yeshiva at MTJ, Masifta Tiferet Yerushalayim on East Broadway. See? Anyway, he said, all my life, I never knowingly caused harm to another human being. That's an accomplishment. It's quite a thing. All my life, I never knowingly caused harm to another human being. Azoy. Okay, thank you so much for coming, folks. Really, this is a lovely turnout. And our wonderful Doreen will post us, I assume.
Shabbat tonight, don't Shabbat services, everybody.
Shabbat services, yes, 6 o'clock.
I got a Siddur on you. There's a link to the Siddur you can download.
Yes,
Stream on your computer so you can follow the services.
wonderful. Thank you so much. Great, beautiful.
Okay, we'll see everybody
Okay,
tonight.
God
Shabbat
bless.
shalom.
Shabbat shalom. Thank you so
Shabbat
much
shalom.
for participating.
Shabbat shalom.
Okay, Zeig gesund. Be well.